webinar looking at how to plan, design and deliver powerful accounts payable. We'll be exploring how one of the UK's oldest and most respected distributors of healthcare products turned their P2P processes around. They were dealing with a largely manual system and having to manage with a lot of the errors and cost issues which go hand in hand with that method of working. So along with the necessary process improvements came the changes in technology. So we're going to have a look at the role technology played in helping the organization and the crucial role that change management had in making sure processes were not only properly understood, but that people were clearly aware of the overall goals and aims as well. We hear a lot about those in accounts payable being at the center of change in their various organizations, and of their being under pressure to create further efficiencies, often with access to fewer resources. And the trouble is, without best practice processes, and above all increased visibility, usually as a result of some level of automation, that's almost impossible. And this webinar, with the help of Matthew Pike and his invaluable first-hand experience, together with Jamie Taylor from Basware, will show you how it's possible to manage an overhaul of processes to really generate value and get the right level of buy-in from those affected. So before I hand you over to Matthew and Jamie, let's just tell you a little bit about the presenters today. Jamie Taylor is a dynamic member of Basware's customer development team and has in-depth knowledge of how their solutions can help achieve some fantastic turnaround results. And Matthew Pike had a vision of an agile and cost-effective metric-driven P2P function, and so he got to work making that happen, and today he's going to talk you through that. And I'm Ellen Leith, editor of Accounts Payable News, a site which I hope you find useful and informative, looking at a lot of the hot topics across the P2P space today. Right, so just before we begin, here's a quick agenda of what we'll be discussing. Jamie Taylor is going to give you a brief overview of Basware before handing over to Matthew Pike, where, as I've mentioned, we'll be learning about his experiences, challenges, and some tips for you as well to take away. Okay, so just before I do hand you over, this session is interactive, and you have got the opportunity to ask questions by adding them into the free text box in your GoToWebinar panel. And if you type these in, I can either ask Jamie or Matthew, depending on the content of the question, and they can address those at the end. We are also going to be asking a polling question today after Jamie's introduction to Basware. And you'll have the opportunity to pick an answer from the multiple choice selection that you'll see coming up on the screen. So please do take part, and I can share the results of you as we speak. Okay, so let me now pass you across to Jamie Taylor of Basware. Across to you, Jamie.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Good morning, and thank you for your attendance and time. I'll just be providing a short 5-minute introduction to Basware. So, okay, so just a bit about Basware. In terms of our organisation, we're consistently ranked as number 1 or number 2 across both P2P and e-invoicing across the world. We're a global business. We have over 1 million users in 1,700 customers in over 60 countries. So our solutions are both compliant with statutory requirements in multiple jurisdictions, plus also provide the visibility and control that those clients require. We're also part of the largest open network. We facilitated the open network basically as an ecosystem to allow suppliers and buyers to transact electronically. So providing e-invoicing both in terms of AP, so inbound electronic invoices, and also AR, so enabling suppliers and clients alike to send electronic invoices and to give them the visibility and control and significantly less cost than traditional methods. So in terms of our DNA, as an organisation, we're basically driven forward in terms of our solutions by our forward-thinking customers. So we ensure that our solutions are both agile, plus also are completely designed around driving results. We have pedigree in this area. We've been established for over 25 years, and as I mentioned earlier, we're a Magic Quadrant leader. Purchase to pay is our complete focus, so we focus purely on that purchase to pay arena. In terms of innovation, we were the first into the marketplace with AP automation. We have a very a purpose-built platform. We focus on making e-invoicing easy, so easy invoicing, and we provide both global delivery and global support. In terms of our client range, our clients, we have clients of all sizes across all industries, from smaller clients that are processing 10,000 transactions a year to large multinational organisations that are processing over 10 million transactions a year. You can see here in terms of our client range, we range from banking, professional services, manufacturing, retail and such. Okay. So I mentioned our solution is about driving financial performance forward, and here are some key metrics that some of our clients have actually achieved. So you can see, for example, Heineken processed 90% of their invoice volume without manual intervention. Effectively, that's one Basware solution that's integrated with multiple ERP systems. They've got multiple instances of ERP that integrates that into the Basware system, so all of the electronic invoices flow in, and 90% are automatically coded, approved, and processed all the way through. The exceptions basically go through the Basware workflow. In terms of purchase to pay, the areas that Basware provides solutions for are from full source to pay, so from sourcing tools all the way through to procurement, e-invoicing, automated matching and automated workflow, all coupled together with the open network that allows the electronic communication of those transactions I've just mentioned electronically and all without paper. Okay, so that was just a very brief overview. I wanted to keep it brief so that to give time for Matthew to go through with his overview. But first of all, I think we're covering off a polling question.
Okay. Yes. Thanks very much for that, Jamie. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to post a polling question for you. So as we get this live, I'll be grateful if you could select a choice of answer by clicking in the appropriate box when it comes up. And as I said, we'll share those questions share those answers for you. Okay. So the question is, what is the focus? What is the focus for 2013 in your AP department? So if you could select your answers now, we can see some of those answers coming in. Fantastic. Okay, so the majority of you have voted. So we've got about 75% of you answered now. So if the rest of you could give your selection, that would be fantastic, and we can close that vote and share the results with you. Lovely, thanks very much. Okay, that's lovely. So at the moment we have, let me just have a look at those. Okay. Yes, we have the majority of you, 79% of you, suggesting that both visibility and control and process efficiency are equally important. And I think that just goes to show that you really need to have those processes under control so that you've got the visibility that you need to measure those metrics and really gain control of your purchase to pay function. Okay, thanks very much for taking part in that. Okay, so now we just move forward with the webinar, and over to you, Matthew Pike, if you just wanted to take your presentation forward.
Thanks, Ellen. So today the focus for me is to talk about how to plan for and design a solution which will deliver invoice automation. So as Ellen just mentioned, really it's all about those process efficiencies and making sure that as an organization you work on or you deliver a project that enables you right from the beginning to deliver those process efficiencies. I'm actually going to focus on two case studies today, which I think give some good insight into different ways of running a project from the beginning to deliver those process efficiencies, and two very contrasting case studies as well. So the first one I'm going to talk about, just to give you a bit of context, is for a leading UK retailer who had a decentralized purchasing operation across their nationwide stores, and they designed a P2P system to process their indirect spend only. The system actually went live in November 2011 with a volume of 150,000 invoices per annum. Now, when they first went live, their straight-through processing rate, i.e. their percentage of invoices that did not need to touch any human, was only 5%, which is very low for a P2P system. But after 6 months, they were able to raise that straight-through processing rate up to 40%, which is probably about normal for indirect spend. Case study 2, slightly different solution in that it was delivered in order to process their direct spend, and with a much larger volume of 600,000 invoices per annum. That went live in July 2012, and it went live with a very high straight-through processing rate at go live of 75%. That's now increased further from there. So what I'm going to talk about is some of the differences in those two case studies and how those very different figures were achieved. Within those process efficiencies, most P2P implementations tend to have a common goal, and that is to reduce the cost per invoice. And what I argue is that this goal should be reflected throughout the whole project, right from the beginning, particularly in the planning and delivery stages. Sometimes I've seen it's very easy to lose sight of that goal between when the business case has been won and then when there are tangible results to judge from the productive environment. So, of course, reducing your cost per invoice has a very significant impact on your business case and your ROI right at the beginning of the project, but then sometimes it tends to get ignored once you go through scoping the system, building the system, and then the whole change management and testing, and then all of a sudden it becomes a big focus again once you get the system into production. So going back to our first case study, where we started off with we achieved very low match rates. I've looked at some of the common themes within that project, and I found that there was a tendency to fall back on current processes pre-automation, rather than to take the pain of redesigning your business processes to fit in with an automated system. The two are very different. Your manual processes that exist pre-automation tend to be very different to how you could design those processes after you have brought the technology in. Also, I found that the testing was limited to testing the built system rather than actually testing the processes. So I guess testing focused on clicking buttons and seeing if they did the right thing, rather than actually defining tests that focused around the operational processes In addition, the change management of the project was deemed as fairly low priority in favor of building a system to suit people rather than the processes. So again, one of the reasons for the relative failure on Go Live was because I guess there was a focus on just delivering a system that met the requirements of people rather than going through the pain of actually rethinking those processes and fitting them in with what would be best towards achieving maximum automation. Also, I found that there was very little focus given to the procurement side. So the retail stores were actually allowed to buy individually with a focus on just free text requisitioning. So there was no or very little centralized procurement to consolidate suppliers and then onboard suppliers into the procurement part of the system. It was all about just allowing the retail stores just to purchase whatever they so wished. So the change management on that didn't lend itself towards an automated solution. So the end result of all of that was that it pushed all of the pain to when the system moved into productive use. So actually the project itself went very smoothly and was delivered within the originally defined timescales and budget and so on. And actually nobody really kind of realized that there was a problem until the system got into productive use. And then it was these 5% match rates were experienced, and of course it led to a negative view of the system, and then the lack of training led to a poor purchasing practice, which then led to the lower match rates. As a result, the business case wasn't met, and people were held accountable for that. So as a result, remedial action, of course, was required immediately, and that's part of what I will talk about now. So the lessons learned from that, right from the beginning of the project, we found that it was important to focus on how you want the processes to look in the future, not on how they look at the moment. Just reiterating what I said just now. Don't aim for an electronic version of your current processes. So invoice automation and reducing that cost per invoice should be at the forefront of the planning process right from the beginning, and that includes all the documentation within the project. So when writing functional specifications and test plans and so on, they should all have a focus on actually delivering what the system has been bought to deliver, essentially. And also to ensure that people are trained to use the system in a way that will promote automation. I'll come on to it in more detail shortly, but if users, for example, don't raise requisitions in the right way, then you've got very little chance of automating the invoicing side. So within case study 1, from that point onwards, the project basically took one main focus, and that was around remedial action to improve the automation and remove manual intervention where possible. Meanwhile, with case study 2, we were able to plan ahead by focusing on this goal right from the beginning of the project. So broadly, what I'm saying is, with case study 1 and case study 2, there's a big difference in the way the projects were run. Case study 1 was all about remedial action after the system had gone into production, but with case study 2, we planned for it for automation right from the beginning, and we'll have a look at some of the differences between those now. So within both of those projects, 5 areas were identified as the key to success for invoice automation. Firstly, straight-through processing. So the focus was always to find ways to drive higher match rates. Secondly, to automate exception handling. So not every invoice is going to match. We know that. But then we put a focus on designing processes to ensure that exceptions which didn't match were handled as quickly as possible and with as little manual intervention as possible. We also wanted to limit system maintenance as well. Often one of the goals of invoice automation is to decrease headcount in certain areas of the business, but in order to achieve that, sometimes one has to build a complex system which can increase system maintenance, which of course requires heads. So the idea was to build a system which did not increase headcount through more advanced system maintenance requirements. Also people. So we look to bring in the right expertise to manage the change within the organization, and then to make sure that people were trained strategically to ensure accurate use of the system. So again, people trained rather than just to click on buttons, people trained in how to intelligently use the system to make sure that we were getting the best possible information from them. And also then a focus on the future as well. So even after the system went live, we tried to focus on improvements to drive supplier onboarding, e-invoicing, and user behavior. So it really was not a case of celebrating, patting yourself on the back once the system went live and that was it. It was a real effort after go live to improve the automation. So we'll look at each of those 5 elements in a little more detail now. So firstly, focusing on straight-through processing. So of course, one of the major ways of improving your straight-through processing is to put a focus on e-invoicing. So receiving electronic invoices from, particularly from high-volume suppliers. So we put a focus on dealing directly with our highest volume key suppliers to get them onto EDI, which enabled us to control the information that we received on the invoices, so that it improved our chances of matching that information to the information on the orders. In case study 2, as I said, this has led to a very high match rate of 75% right from the beginning. So what this means is, in case study 2, we've got 420,000 invoices per annum which aren't being touched by a human being. This isn't the norm by any stretch. It has come about because of a mature procurement practice within the organisation. Because it's direct spend. Effectively, this is their business. This is what they do. So that mature procurement practice is in place. But equally, it's also come about because of good planning. In case study 1, after go live, the organisation also engaged carefully with high volume suppliers to improve those match rates. So effectively, what they did was pick off individual suppliers, and this paid high dividends because they were able to get quite a large volume of their invoicing quite quickly onto EDI. Also, so accurate invoicing, invoice matching starts with accurate ordering. So with case study 1, the main challenge was because of the localized purchasing among the stores, it was difficult to control procurement practice. So an exercise of onboarding suppliers into catalogues through the procurement part of the system enabled far greater control in the procurement process, and this increased the match rates as well. So they engaged in again a supplier onboarding exercise to get the keys to their key suppliers, such as stationery and IT, onto catalogues. Also, another important point within the project is, again, I've alluded to this earlier, is to test the process during the test phases of the project. This will enable you to at least have a very good idea of what your match rates will be. So within case study 2, we ran a pilot prior to going live with actual live invoices matching to live orders, but within a test environment. We ran that over the course of about a month, which gave us a very clear picture as to what match rates we would achieve and we were able to analyze that on a supplier-by-supplier basis. So if there were high-volume suppliers which were perhaps invoicing us with incorrect information, we were able to address that prior to going live. Okay, so on to the second point about automating the exception handling. So as I said, you can't expect every invoice to match, so it's all about how you process those invoices that don't match. I can't stress this enough, to keep workflows simple. So when invoices require approval, try to get the system, get the invoice from to the approver as quickly as possible. Within case study 1, in the initial implementation, the pre-Basware DOA was put in place, which was quite complex. There were up to 5 steps in the approval chain, which we were able to remove later when the decision to simplify it was made. So rather than stepping up through potentially five different people in the financial approval process, the invoice was passed directly to the approver, and this saved a significant amount of time and manual touch points. This does not necessarily mean that you need to lose control. Removing steps in the approval process doesn't necessarily mean that you have to relinquish control of your invoices. Again, through the use of catalogs, which I've just referred to, we were able to remove up to 7 procurement and technical review steps. So effectively what we were doing was approving the products themselves rather than on a transactional level against the requisition or the invoice, but on a catalog level. So the technical and procurement approval were implied within the fact that the product was on the catalog at the right price. So as a result, we were able to remove all of those steps. And then on to my third point about limiting system maintenance. In case study 1, for the first 6 months, 1 full FTE was required to handle first-line support and data maintenance within the system. So the aim was to cut that maintenance where it doesn't add value. So again, looking at key areas of the whole process where you can introduce automation. One of those is within the ordering process. So again, we engage with suppliers towards catalog buying and also XML ordering as well. What this meant is that a person is not required to place the order with the supplier. Rather, the system does it through placing an XML order directly into the supplier's systems. Of course, we also drove suppliers towards e-invoicing as well. So by closing the automation loop, we ensured that the last time a person had to touch a transaction was when confirming receipt of the goods. So effectively, once the invoice comes in, no manual touch point was required after that. As a result of this, after 6 months, we were able to absorb the first-line support and data maintenance into the existing IT help desk function. So that 1 FTE after 6 months, we were able to remove that through intelligent use of the system. And then onto the people, as I mentioned earlier. So case study 1, I've already mentioned that the lack of change management meant that training end users was not originally seen as a high priority. What this meant was that people didn't know how to raise requisitions in the right way, and this led to inaccurate data and thus low match rates. Also, negative news about the usability of the system spread around the business like wildfire. I think this is a fairly common theme with most system implementations. It can easily get around the business if their results are poor from the system. So in order to address this, invoice automation expertise was brought into the project team to guide the organization through best practices and to ensure that those best practices were reflected in the system. So it was all about reorganizing the processes and ensuring that the system reflected that reorganization. Of course, in case study 2, this expertise was there at an earlier stage, so we were able to plan for all of that up front, thus saving time later and obviously achieving high match rates from the start. So in both cases, formal change management and training programs were developed. As a result, many of the users felt they were actually overtrained by the time that we went live. We also ensured that the strategic message was reflected in how we actually trained the users. So, as I said, it's all about getting the users to use the system in a way that promotes automation. Okay, so in the final analysis, as I said, within case study 1, by following that, we were able to increase match rates quite steeply in a relatively short space of time. And within case study 2, where we achieved match rates which were very high right from the beginning, and that was because we were able to put in the planning and the focus on automation all the way through the project, and that led to those positive results. But the end result, of course, with both of those case studies is 40% match rates on indirect spend is a good level, and I'm sure that figure is rising within that project. And the 75% match rates on direct spend is probably significantly high, and but still we're able to aim for higher match rates than that even. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Matthew. Very informative webinar. There have been a couple of questions from people, and one of which was there sort of active resistance to change, and how long did it take to train existing staff on the new processes? In
terms of active resistance to change, from certain individuals, I would say yes. Unfortunately, the P2P project, or any project, is obviously pushed forward and driven by individuals, and so yeah, during the project there was resistance to change, but of course once the results of once concrete results are available, that resistance does often tend to change quite quickly.
Okay. And there's another one which I hope is clear, but the question is, does all this assume that purchase orders are specifically issued by the requisitioner, or where there is a detailed contract for, say, time and materials, cost data is entered into a pre-system? I think that was in that's another question. In case studies 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I guess that question probably mostly relates to case study 1 within these particular examples, because I guess time and materials tends to relate more to indirect spend, particularly in the case of these 2 particular businesses. Most of that was handled through contracts. So rather than setting up purchase orders for a I don't know, say 80 days delivered over 3 months or whatever, we would set it up as a contract, which meant that the invoice would match to that contract rather than to a PO. That's separate functionality within the Basware P2P suite.
Okay, and then I think there's a couple of more questions just come in. In case studies 1 and 2, how long did it take the project from start to go live?
Case study 1 was, as I said, was a relatively simple project. It went smoothly and reasonably quickly. It was about 4 months from start to finish. Case study 2 was far more complex. As you can tell, there's a lot of supplier onboarding during the actual project, and obviously that increases dependencies and unknowns as well over a resource that you don't necessarily have control of. So with case study 2, it was about 8 to 9 months from starting the implementation through to going live.
Okay, and a few more questions as well. Both of these case studies have a large volume of invoices. Do you see companies using automated systems for lower volumes, say for about 2,000 per month, for example? I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked previously on projects where on lower volumes, and the savings are still there within those lower volumes, and also the visibility is also a very important factor as well, which again, which was I guess proven by the poll earlier. So there are very definitely advantages to be gained on the lower volumes as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a couple of other questions which you may want to take offline, but a couple of people are wanting to know whether, one, you've worked with any NHS organisations or experience in the legal world for such projects. Is that something that you have experience with at all?
I haven't worked within the NHS. I have worked with legal organisations.
And perhaps that's a question aimed more at Basware anyway, and I expect, Jamie, the answer is yes.
Yes, and we can confirm those back to you, Alan.
Sure.
So,
okay. And we've got a few other questions as well, and I can see them coming in now. But I think if we close the webinar here, and what we'll do, and I know that there have been sort of 2 or 3 other questions, but I think they're more pertinent to actual the software itself. And I think what'll be good to do is to take those offline, and I can certainly ask Jamie or via me to come back to those questions directly. But if we end the webinar here, I think that, as I said, we can address those afterwards. And the slides for the webinar will be available afterwards. And if you have got any further questions, let me know, and I can get those answers back to you. So thanks once again for attending, and do keep a lookout for the next APN webinar on the 5th of December, where we'll be having a look at how to provide cash flow to your SME suppliers while also benefiting your bottom line. It promises to be another fantastic webinar, and I do hope you're able to attend. In the meantime, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for attending, and of course thanks very much to Jamie and to Matthew for a fantastic presentation. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.